The Supreme Court is the highest judicial authority in the United States, with the power to interpret the Constitution and set legal precedents that shape American life. Comprised of 9 justices appointed for life, the court's decisions impact everything from civil rights to gun ownership. When lower courts disagree or a law's constitutionality is challenged, the Supreme Court can step in, and its rulings become the law of the land. The justices' lifetime appointments mean their influence extends far beyond the presidents who nominate them. The current court, with a 6-3 conservative majority, has been especially active in revisiting major legal precedents. One of the most contentious issues before the court is the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms. Recent decisions have defined what firearms Americans can own, and under what circumstances the government can restrict access. A recent 6-3 decision on gun ownership for those under domestic violence restraining orders has reignited national debate. The case, United States versus Rahimi, challenged a federal law barring those under domestic violence restraining orders from possessing firearms. Zaki Rahimi, after a restraining order for assaulting his girlfriend, was prosecuted for having a gun and argued the law violated his Second Amendment rights. His case gained traction after the Supreme Court's 2022 Bruin decision, which required gun laws to align with historical traditions from the founding era. The Fifth Circuit Court sided with Rahimi, claiming no historical precedent for disarming people over domestic violence, and declared the law unconstitutional. This ruling threatened to undermine protections for abuse victims and called into question other gun regulations. The Department of Justice appealed, arguing that history supports disarming those deemed dangerous. The Supreme Court now had to clarify whether the Second Amendment protects gun rights for individuals found to be a threat. The stakes were high. A ruling for Rahimi could have jeopardized laws disarming felons and the mentally ill. The nation watched as the court prepared to decide the future of gun regulation. In a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court upheld the federal law, allowing the government to temporarily disarm those found by a court to pose a credible threat. Chief Justice Roberts, writing for the majority, argued that the right to bear arms is not absolute, and has always had limits. The court found that historical laws, like surety and affray statutes, show a tradition of disarming dangerous individuals. While not identical to modern restraining orders, these laws share the principle of protecting public safety. The majority clarified that courts should look for relevant historical principles, not exact replicas, when evaluating gun laws. The ruling affirmed that someone found by a court to be a threat can be disarmed, fitting within long-standing legal tradition. This decision was narrowly tailored, focusing on cases with judicial findings of danger, not broad new gun control measures. The court struck a balance between individual rights and the need to protect potential victims. The ruling marked a pragmatic step back from the strictest interpretations of the Bruin decision. 3 justices dissented, led by Justice Clarence Thomas, who argued the majority abandoned the strict historical test set by Bruin. Thomas insisted that no founding-era law stripped gun rights based on the possibility of future violence without a criminal conviction. He argued that civil restraining orders lack the due process of criminal trials and shouldn't justify disarmament. The dissent warned that the majority's flexible approach could allow almost any gun regulation, eroding Second Amendment protections. They feared this ruling could set a precedent for disarming people based on civil findings, not criminal guilt. The dissenters saw the right to bear arms as fundamental, only to be limited after a criminal conviction. They accused the majority of prioritizing policy over constitutional fidelity. The dissent highlighted the deep ideological divide over the scope of the Second Amendment. Gun rights groups and many gun owners saw the decision as a betrayal, fearing it weakens the Second Amendment. Organizations like the NRA condemned the ruling, arguing it allows fundamental rights to be stripped without a criminal conviction. They warned that civil restraining orders lack the due process of criminal trials, risking the disarmament of innocent people. Many believe the court's flexible historical test gives judges too much leeway to uphold modern gun laws. Advocates worry this sets a slippery slope. If dangerousness is enough, what other groups could lose their rights next? The decision, they argue, opens the door to further restrictions and undermines the clear standards set by Bruin. For many, the case is about more than domestic violence. It's about the government's power to disarm citizens without criminal convictions. The ruling has fueled anxiety and distrust among Second Amendment supporters. In contrast, domestic violence prevention advocates and law enforcement celebrated the decision as a vital victory for public safety. They argued that removing guns from abusers saves lives, as firearms dramatically increase the risk of domestic homicide. Groups like the National Network to End Domestic Violence praised the court for prioritizing victims' safety over an absolutist view of gun rights. They emphasized that restraining orders require judicial findings of credible threats, not mere accusations. Advocates said the ruling recognizes the deadly link between abuse and firearms, and that the law must evolve to address modern dangers. The decision was seen as a pragmatic application of constitutional principles to contemporary problems. For survivors, the ruling brought relief and a sense of validation that the justice system can protect them. The court's decision was hailed as a powerful statement that public safety can factor into Second Amendment interpretation. The Rahimi decision marks a turning point in the legal battle over gun rights in America. It signals that the Supreme Court is not willing to dismantle all gun regulations, even with a conservative majority. By upholding the domestic violence law, the court clarified that public safety can justify certain firearm restrictions rooted in historical principles. Legal scholars see this as the court seeking a middle ground, protecting individual rights while allowing for reasonable, historically grounded regulations. The decision will shape how lower courts handle a wave of Second Amendment challenges. It provides a framework for distinguishing between responsible citizens and those who can be temporarily disarmed. The ruling reaffirms that constitutional rights are not absolute and can be limited to protect the community. As debates over gun violence continue, the principles from this case will influence American law and society for years to come.